So guys, welcome back to a combination video of behind the scenes on how I make my videos on super high-end audio gear, but also the gear itself that I use. This is part two, for lack of a better word, of a several-part series on discussing why I left the Sony FX3 that I had and ended up getting the Canon C70. In that video, I talked about some of the decisions that, or rather some of the factors that played into my decision. And I'll briefly recap them here, but check out that other video. And now I'm gonna start to go into more detail as to the actual features that I like and differences that I notice, whether they be good or bad for somebody considering either going with the Sony or the Canon. For me, it was really a desire to do two things. I found that the look of the Sony FX3, by the way, great camera, compact, super sharp, nothing to complain about in regards to that. But it's sort of like a car for me. The more you own it, the more that there are intangibles that really either make you love it or not fall in love with it. And that's kind of what I found with the Sony FX3. It took me a while of using it to realize what I needed for my workflow, for my style, for my preference, and how the Sony didn't fit that. I ended up reaching out to, and guys, I don't get paid for any of these videos. This is just my own personal thing. If you follow my videos, you know I'm a big believer in supporting small companies, so small businesses. And when I say small businesses, I mean not these multinational conglomerates, not that they're small in the sense of they've got two people working for them. So I ended up with this camera because of the awesome guys and this lens. Because of the awesome guys at Hot Rod Camera. They were really the only ones. And I reached out to people in Texas and nationwide that I needed help making my decision. And for everybody else, I was just too small time. I just wasn't worthy of their time. And Hot Rod really, when I explained to them the issue that I was having with the Sony that I wasn't liking and what the feature set that I wanted, they really confirmed that the Sony C70 would be a good step up for me. So what are some of those differences? First, the look and feel of the photography. And when I say photography, I mean cinematography. The Sony was almost just too sharp for me. It was too, in the music world, we call it digital. And we say that as almost a negative. It was sterile, and that's not fun to me. I want something that's more of an analog look and feel, more cinematic, little less sharp. And when I say sharp, I don't mean out of focus. It's still sharp, just may not be pinpoint. A little bit more as we see it in real life, as we can emotionally connect and bond with what we're seeing on screen versus it being very sterile and keeping us at arm's length. I know there is no technical way of measuring what I'm describing. It's a feel that either you like and you notice or you don't. Initially, I didn't notice that. I didn't understand any of that stuff. And I watched so many videos online about cameras and cinematography. And even I looked at the Canon initially and I was like, well, that's just too much camera for me. I don't need that. And I went with the Sony. And had I gotten the advice from a Hot Rod Camera even before I bought the Sony that the Canon would better suit my needs, I'm not sure I was prepared to hear it. I think I needed to go through that process of learning on my own what works and what doesn't. So certainly the color science on the Canon, I prefer. The overall picture quality to me, and when I say quality, again, I don't mean sharpness, I just mean overall feel. I enjoy working with the Canon and seeing what it produces more than what I do with the Sony. I also feel as though I don't spend, well, I know I don't spend a lot of time on color grading or anything like that. I really don't need to. Most of my gear is black, silver, or somewhat in between. I'm not here dealing with forest scenes and setting suns and things like that. But I found that for me, it's a matter of 1 minute to find a color grading look that works on the Canon versus the Sony. I felt as though I was always tweaking, going back and forth. I could never get the skin tones just right. When I got the skin tones just right, everything else was off a little bit. So I couldn't get it to my liking. And I actually find it challenging on the gear that I do because, and video, because of the different colors, because of the some is silver, some is black right next to each other. Plus I want what's in the shadows, and I need detail there. And then I've got different types of materials for, so I do find that in that regard a challenge with lighting and getting everything just right. For me, the Canon, I'm going to tell you, I probably spend half as much time on my workflow with the Canon that I did on the Sony. Part of that is, and this goes into another thing that I prefer the Canon over the Sony, is all the buttons. I originally thought all the buttons, I don't want to say gimmicky, but I didn't realize how they would really help me. And for the Canon, I've got a button for just about everything. And they're in a logical, natural place. I didn't even realize this until I was using this the second or third time. And I stand in front of the camera. It's a manual focus, so I've got the screen flipped out and I'm focusing because I love to use red peaking. I will tell you that, in my opinion, the red peaking on the Sony is better. It's easier to tell when something's in focus or not, but it's certainly still usable on the Canon. But even just reaching around, you can see you've got your magnification buttons to zoom in so you can red focus it. You've got the joystick so you can move the little box around where it's zoomed in on. I can very easily, logically do all of this from in front of the camera. And I can use this and I can get it back and ready to go. The buttons just seem more logically laid out to me on the Canon. And because of the buttons that they have, it cuts down on my workflow. I'm not always going into the menu. The menu is significantly more in depth in the Canon than the Sony. It seems to have many more features and settings to allow me to customize this that the Sony didn't have. It's also easier and more logical to find them. Whereas with the Sony, I was often having to go into the menu to change things or find what I was looking for. With the Canon, boom, it's right there. It just saves me a lot of time. And I know I'm not a big time movie producer where this time adds up, but you know, I have other jobs and other things I need to do. I have make videos on a multitude of topics. I can't be spending time playing with the camera. I just want to shoot and go. And the Canon allows me to do that. I will say that I feel as though some of the joystick, the round button, the Sony probably has a little bit better quality feel on some of that than the Canon, but it's not a detriment in my mind. It's not really a big step back. The Sony feels really solid. Overall, this Canon feels extremely solid. I actually like that this is a little bit larger. Now, of course, we've kind of decked this out. I've got a wireless transmitter here for the lavalier when I use it. I can get my hand around this. I like having the little hand guard there. So for me, I prefer the size of this, which goes into the point of another feature that this has. This has got internal RAW shooting. This was big for me. I didn't realize I wanted this at first. By the time I did the Sony and then I had to add the Atomos on top, and now I've got a lot more big weight, a lot more expense. Now I've got multiple batteries I need to keep charged that never lasted the same amount of time. Watch my previous video. I talk about the quality control issues and the reliability issues I had after only 30 days with the Atomos and how I had to go without it. I wanted that out of my life. The Canon allows me to shoot RAW internally. But, and this is a big but for me, I use Final Cut Pro. For some reason, with the Canon RAW, when I shoot in Canon RAW, it does not give me the adjustability in terms of setting the ISO and all that the Sony RAW does. So I don't know if that's an incompatibility on Canon's behalf. I don't know if that's an incompatibility on Apple and Final Cut Pro. I actually had to go online and I had to look it up, and I was thinking it was something I was doing wrong, but then I found out that RAW adjustments in that regard are not available in Final Cut Pro. I've got too much time, energy invested in Final Cut Pro. I'm not about to switch over to DaVinci Resolve. It's just not worthy for me to go through all that, because my understanding is you do have those adjustments in DaVinci Resolve. So Canon, if this is your doing, please fix it in an update, a firmware update. And Apple, well, Apple's a lost cause, so I'm not even going to reach out to Apple. So in terms of the overall size and weight of this, by the time you add this is initially heavier, but by the time you add the Atomos, they come in a similar size. Well, this is still going to be smaller, but a similar weight. And it's much easier to manage for me throwing it in a bag, moving it around, than having to deal with a separate monitor and things of that nature. So those are what we're going to cover. And I'll cover one more in this one, and then I'll save. I'm looking at a list. I've got a whole list of other topics I want to talk about on this coming up. The Sony has got many more cage options. And this has got a very unique, the way the holes are lined up. It's different on this than on other ones. So you don't have as many cage options for this. I will tell you, I kind of got caught up in the whole cage thing. Come to find out, I really don't need it that much for this. And I do have a regret. I should have reached out to Hot Rod and they would have steered me right. Everybody kept saying, oh, Bright Tangerine is, oh, it's the best, it's the best, it's the best. Guys, I got to tell you, I ended up going with, I bought it, and the items I bought for this don't work. They don't line up on the bottom here, even though they're listed for the C70. Nowhere on the Bright Tangerine website does it state any of that stuff. There's very little information on the Bright Tangerine. It's also priced ridiculously high. I ended up buying a Blue Condor, I think it is, base plate, which gives me the mounting options on the bottom. And guys, I'll tell you, maybe some professional can tell the difference in quality between them and thinks that Bright Tangerine is worth 5x the cost. I personally don't. I would tell you to save the money. There was no difference in fit, feel, function, or anything like that. So now I have a bunch of brand new unused Bright Tangerine stuff I have to sell because it's just not fitting my needs for this. So definitely make sure from a cage option point of view you have what you need. I don't really need to go crazy on that. This is the Canon handle. It allows me to add what I need. It comes with the thing here if I want to do a shotgun mic and all that stuff. But yeah, that just was a kind of a disappointment for me in regards to Bright Tangerine. In other videos, I'm going to go over the preamps. I'm going to go over the plugs. I'm going to go over the battery life, the battery costs, and the size of the screen, the resolution of the screen, what it's like having bigger lenses on this versus the Sony. Is actually quite a big difference in regards to that. So I'm going to go over all that in future videos. So stay tuned. And if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. And again, guys, don't make the mistakes that I made in regards to just buying from where you want. Build the relationship with your dealer. Hot Rod they steered me right on this lens. They saved me money on this lens because they told me when I had the Sony, they said, Michael, get the PL mount with one of their adapters. And I said, okay, fine. And I did. Boy, were they right. Because when I left Sony, and at the time I never thought I would, I thought maybe I'd upgrade to the FX3. But at the time when I left Sony and I went with Canon, all I had to do was buy a new Hot Rod camera, Canon to PL mount adapter, which is a phenomenal adapter, by the way. And they saved me money because I didn't have to sell the lens, the Schneider lens. I didn't have to then rebuy it. I love this lens. The only thing I think I will need is, as I see myself, this is a 25 millimeter. I do see myself probably wanting to get a 35 or 40 millimeter at some point, just to have a little bit tighter shot. But between those two, I've got everything I need, I think, pretty covered. So stay tuned, subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.